what pretty much happened was, like, I don't know if you guys know this, but basically it's fascinating. It had to do with Florida, right? It's always about Florida. And down here in this little county called Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade County is basically I'm going to say a diverse county. It's overwhelmingly, well, at least it was back then, Democratic. And what happened is that certain ballots were not being counted in the proper manner. See, back in the day, let me use this, they used to actually vote. Yeah, but they didn't have Scantrons in Florida. I think in Florida what they should have had was like a children's coloring book where you had Bush on one side and Gore on the others, and maybe you could color them in. Exactly. That would have been so much easier. But they used to do it and they used to do this in California too. And for those of you old enough to remember this, we used to do this. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong, but basically you punch a hole, right? Using a little thing that looks sort of like a pin. Punch a hole in the hole that goes along with your candidate that you want to vote for, okay? There's all kinds of stuff that can go wrong. For example, if you don't push the thing far enough in, and you have this thing that, you guys can't see it, but if you don't punch it all the way through, you're going to have a piece of paper that's going to be hanging on. And that's what's called a hanging chad. Okay? And the question is, if the chad or the little piece of paper is not punched out all the way, does that count as the actual vote? Was the intent of the person to vote for Al Gore when apparently the pin didn't go all the way through? Or was it just an accident, right? It's really ridiculous. And the other thing that can happen too with that old system is you might not line up the paper the right way. Like you might not stick it in all the way because you have to like push it down in the thing, and then you push it, and then you might punch the wrong candidate or something. And you might not even know that you did that. You might have thought you were voting for Al Gore, but you really voted for nobody because you might have done that. And so in the end, what they found out is that there were about 500 disputed ballots that had these hanging chads. And the Secretary of State, which was a woman named Katherine Harris in the state of Florida, who, by the way, is the Secretary of State to the governor at that time of Florida, named Jeb Bush. She certified the votes. Because that's her job. That's what the Secretary of State is supposed to do. The Secretary of State certifies the votes so that the votes become legal. So she wasted no time because the Gore campaign wanted to recount, and have independent agencies come in and look at the definition of what a chad was and all this stuff. And they were saying like, well, of course these 500 votes, questionable ballots were voting for Al Gore. I mean, clearly, the chad was hanging on there. They meant to vote for him, for Gore. So Katherine Harris said, no, we're not going to do any more recounts. Election's over. Gore takes it up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court even is undecided almost. That's why you have 9 justices. In a 5-4 decision, very controversial, the Supreme Court votes to certify Florida's tally of the votes. And forevermore, the Democrats will always be saying that Gore got robbed, because if you would have counted those ballots legally, which they contend they should have done, everything would have been different in history. You know, but it all came down to 500 votes. And so for any knucklehead out there that thinks their vote doesn't count, think again. Like your vote by yourself might not count, but when it's like a mass of people and it's that close, it does count. And think about the consequences. If Gore wins Florida, which had at that time 25 electoral votes, he would have won the presidency, right? So the stakes were very, 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 very high. Do you have a question? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In the UK, there is basically a box that you check mark with the name of the person, big letters, bold, big body, symbol for that party.
That would make it easier. Yeah, that would make it easier. Our state of California has done that basically too, where we basically bubble in like a Scantron, and that works really good. Yeah, of course it would. It just shows like in Florida and other states have done this. When you have punch cards, you get into gray areas, right? It kind of depends on who, in a close election, like if the election wasn't close and it was like 20,000 votes and only 500 of them are hanging chads, it's not going to matter, right? But when it gets close like that and you have partisan politics at work and you have the Secretary of State who's sympathizing with Bush, it makes it fishy. And from the Democratic point of view, you can see how they were like, this is really fishy, right? And they could never really accept it. From Bush's perspective, it's like, well, justice was served. These people, their votes shouldn't count. So it's kind of like, who makes those decisions? If we had a better system back then in Florida where it's just bubble in who you want, like we have in California now, you get less error. I mean, because it's pretty clear, if you vote for the one you color in, I'm telling you, that's what they should have done. They should have had a big old, like, egg-sized thing where it's like, you color it in all the way through, and that's what you vote for. They should have done that. They didn't do that. And you know what's dumb is, 2004, Florida didn't fix the problem. They still didn't fix it by 2004. Now, I'm sure Florida's doing okay now. They still didn't fix it. And so then you get Bush, his 8 years. The Democrats will forever say that you got an illegitimate president. And that's what it was. And so the Supreme Court's decision was basically, again, to reiterate that, a 5-4, extremely down the line, partisan position to give Bush the election, or from the Democrats' view, to give Bush the election. Okay? Yes, sir.
What I think is funny is that this is like one of the closest elections, but it wasn't close because everybody was unsure who to vote for, just nobody were prepared. I think that's why it was so close.
You got a point there. Neither of the candidates, like I said before, neither of the candidates were that exciting. They just weren't. I mean, Gore was boring. He talked like this. He didn't inspire people like Bill Clinton. He's kind of like an economics professor. Make it real bored real quick. George Bush, I think the reason the Republicans picked him was because he was from the South and he knew some Spanish. I'm not going to say he was like fluent, but the Republicans have not had the greatest relationship with Latino people. So maybe they were thinking, oh, he can appeal to them. But even some in his own party were like, this guy's an idiot. So I don't think either of the candidates really had the public's attention. They weren't superpower politicians like Clinton was. Clinton was just an exception. Obama was at the beginning kind of an exception, kind of a politician that could really transcend people and make them feel inspired. These two, not so much. And another thing that really messed up Al Gore was the presence of a third-party candidate named Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader, member of the Green Party, he got almost 2 million votes. Some of those in Florida. So if Nader was not running, things have been different. I don't know. It's really hard to say. But it's just one of these things about American history that is just unbelievable. I can remember that was my first year of teaching high school, and I was like, oh my gosh! Like all we did for that whole week was we just watched CNN in my class. Well, maybe not. That'd be too bad. But we definitely, it was like a meteorite hitting. If you were a science teacher, like a meteorite hitting. Oh, cool. This is like something you don't get to see every day. And all the students every day were like, Mr. Bird, who won the election? I'm like, I don't know. And this is before Twitter and cell phones. And of course, then no one can check we didn't have phones back then that could look up internet. You could call people on it, but that was about it. So it was pretty crazy, pretty interesting. The whole the hanging Chad thing, all of that, just the timeline of this, it happened in November, right? Super Tuesday, first or second Tuesday of the month in November. That's when they usually do the election, 2000. This whole thing went all the way almost until Christmas. And so it took literally that long to recount all the votes, go through all the legalisms. It was hotly contested. And now at the time, no one knew what was to happen with Bush. Nobody knew about September 11th. Nobody understood that. I do think what was interesting in the video clip you guys saw about Clinton, while everyone's distracted by Monica, what's going on? Osama bin Laden planning that big 3,000 death September 11th, which is basically what we'll kind of start out talking about next time. Next time it's going to be Bush and Obama, and I'm going to predict the future. We're going to come full circle. It's going to be Clinton, and then maybe Bush's wife after that. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I'm just kidding. I'll stick around if you have questions.